Welcome to this week's episode of Chasing Greatness. Man, I am so glad you have joined us here for this episode. Been a fun start to July these last few weeks. We're off to the races in our second half of the year. If you'd missed some of our reset stuff that we did in June, helping you reset the year, it's not too late to make those adjustments that we need to make to just make sure we dominate this back half of the year. Is something we're all trying to do as we chase greatness here together, trying to help other people chase greatness. The last couple of weeks, we had master teacher Susan Barber on with us, and it was just so great to hear her perspective from the classroom today. Susan been teaching a long time. If you miss those episodes and you know a teacher, your kids' teachers, any teacher at all, give them those 2 episodes. I'm telling you, Susan shared some great stuff, really for all of us who are interested in the next generation having every opportunity they can. It's a good listen. If you're a parent, even if you have young people working on your staff in your company or on your team that you're trying to coach, she just had so many good things to say that'll be good reminders. Thanks so much for sharing the episodes, for hitting that like button, for your comments, all that stuff. We love it when you interact with us on the YouTube channel, on the podcast channel, all that. It's awesome. So thanks for tuning in this week. We got a real treat for you this week. It's another opportunity for us to learn from my good friend Mark Miller, who is the Vice President of High Performance Leadership at Chick-fil-A. We love Chick-fil-A. It's so much fun to get to work with them and do stuff. And Mark has just been so groundbreaking in his leadership thinking and the way he's helped them as a company. Such a great team there, and Mark's been a big part of that for over 40 years. If you listened over the last few months, you've heard Mark on the show a few times. I had a long interview with him, and we've broken that up into some good stuff. And today we've got another one of those conversations with Mark. It's going to be fascinating. I asked him about his son, Justin, Justin is a young, in his 30s leader. I say young leader, in your 30s now, you're young to me, but Justin leads an organization here based in Atlanta, but it really is impacting. The work is in East Africa, and it's an organization called Care for AIDS. Justin's story goes back almost 15 years now to when he first got on an airplane and went over to Kenya to shoot a documentary with some of his buddies. I asked Mark about that, and I tried to connect the dot here of how do we trust people who are on our teams, or maybe as a parent, how do we trust people? And so that'll be a fascinating answer. You'll get to hear Mark here in just a second on that. And then we got, at the end of our conversation today, I asked him about some of the things that energize him. One of them in particular is photography. And so you'll be fascinated to hear Mark answer on that. So let's jump into this next session of our conversation with Mark Miller. So I want to shift here for a second and talk about, this is going to seem kind of weird, but I want to talk about parenting here for a second. So we're filming here today at Care for AIDS in Atlanta. Your son, Justin, is the CEO. He leads this organization, pretty incredible place. And great work going on in Africa that we've all got to be a part of and support and see that and go. It's been fun to be a part of that. But I want to rewind that tape, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. Justin is maybe getting out of high school or he's in college. And this thing starts when you and Donna, for some reason, thought it was a good idea to let Justin's request of, can I go to Africa with a couple of my buddies and film a documentary? I mean, so you actually at that point said yes. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'd love to have been at that dinner, when he asked or whatever, but you let these guys get on an airplane, they go and,
Well, he was 19. I mean,
here's my parenting question. I have so many.
He may have been 18.
I have so many young parents that are talking to me all of a sudden about, and they've just watched us. Our kids are grown now and they're out, on their own, and letting go is kind of hard. People talking about, how do you let go? How do you trust? And I think there's a correlation here in an organization where sometimes we don't give them enough opportunity early on. Where does that power to say yes come from? I mean, sometimes we want to micromanage, we want to control if it's a kid, and yet there's tremendous power and growth, as we've seen here with this. But just by giving people opportunities, got to be some boundaries, got to be some guidelines. I got that, but can you talk a little bit about? Go back to that story, like. Is that hard to let him go do that? And
Well, I think you hit on it in part. let's talk about it in an organizational context. Giving people opportunity, giving people responsibility, giving people challenges. It's still within boundaries, and you still have to exercise judgment and discernment as a leader.
Right.
Who
gets the opportunity?
Who is
how big of an opportunity?
Gonna do this, or who is gonna do that? And I will say, I think it's not really a question of are they ready, but what are they ready for? Because most people are ready for something as far as growth, opportunity, responsibility, but they may not be ready for something huge. So let's just go back to that story. Justin was a very he was a good kid. He was responsible. He was conscientious. He was thoughtful. So that helps make those types of decisions. He was not going by himself. Back to the whole judgment piece. He's not going by himself.
He had a couple other crazy guys.
and the boundary that you may not know that we established, I said, you got to get a guide on the ground.
Yeah.
I said, if you can get a guide on the ground to help you.
You're not just winging it.
You're not just walking the streets of Nairobi.
Right.
Or in the slums. If you can get a guide on the ground, we give you our full support. So that was a boundary that I felt like was appropriate. And interesting now, has it been 15 years?
Yeah. It's
15 years later, they had two guides then, and they are their two national directors today.
Co-founders of the
whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's judgment. I mean, ultimately, leaders are paid for judgment.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, we have skills that we have to master, and we call them the fundamentals, and we need to do those things. But even the application of those skills requires discernment, judgment, and ultimately, we pray for wisdom.
Yeah.
Right? Because the answers aren't always clear cut.
Yeah.
But in that case, it was a combination of look at the person. Not ready or not, but what are they ready for? And you say what boundaries would be appropriate to be willing to make this happen.
This is a little bit of this whole idea that you've written about of engaging and developing people. You just mentioned it. Everybody in your organization really needs to develop. Everybody needs to grow. Everybody is going to be somewhere 15 years down the road. And sometimes me being thoughtful today, putting boundaries, pushing somebody out of the nest, challenging them, not making them come to me, but as the leader saying, let's get you on a path of development. There's so much power in that, I think.
Yeah. So let me give you a story. Not many people know this happened years ago at Chick-fil-A, corporate, because all the restaurants are independently operated. And so they're company-owned, independently operated. So when I tell Chick-fil-A stories, I try to distinguish. So I'm going to talk about corporate for a second. To your point of everybody needs to grow, we required an annual development plan of our business consultants years before we ever required a business plan.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I'll tell you one reason I would argue that that's good for anybody, but particularly if you're in an organization that is blessed to have high retention. So think about most organizations and the turnover that they experience. Where do they get new ideas? Well, it's often the new person at the table coming from somewhere else. Well, our corporate retention, last time I checked, is still at 95% or higher year over year for 40 years.
Incredible.
Now, there may be one blip in there. Some folks took early retirements a few years ago. I'm guessing that probably blipped our percentage 1 year. Yeah. But so I'm sitting in meetings with the same people for 20 and 30 plus years. I was in a meeting the other day with two guys, and we've been in meetings together over 30 years. Well, where are you getting your new ideas?
Yeah.
Where are you getting your fresh perspective? It's only if you go out and seek it, if you go out and look for it, if you make development a priority. If not, you're going to get real stale real fast.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. So I want to before I let you go here, I got a couple more things. So I want to talk about photography for a second. So you are a gifted photographer. You made some great pictures. It's pretty amazing. And this is one of those hobbies, I'll call it, that it could have been a career for you, but it's something that I sense it energizes you. It's fun for you. You probably don't get to do it as much as you'd like to, but talk about the gift of photography in your life. Like what you've done you've shot some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about photography, because I want the people who are listening. Photography probably won't be their thing, but there are some things. Let's go back to that conversation a minute ago that energize you. They'll have their own deal, but talk a little bit about how photography's been such a cool thing in your life.
Okay, it goes back to, I'd been on corporate staff about 6 months. I'd been working in the warehouse and the mailroom, and I was asked to start corporate communications. Again, there's 16 people on staff, but I get to start corporate communications, which looking back, you could argue makes no sense. So I was a student. I was going to school at night at Georgia State. And so I changed my major to communications. When they said, will you start corporate communications? I went and changed my major so I could do that. In fact, we didn't even call it that back then. We called it audiovisual services or something, which became corporate communications. And within days, I was having to hire photographers. And I couldn't even talk to them. I didn't understand the language. I knew nothing. So I decided to sign up for a photography class so I could do my day job.
Okay.
Right. And it was under my communications major. And so it was something that came relatively easy. I mean, I understood it pretty quickly. And, I think some might say, well, you have an eye for it. I don't even know if that's a thing or not, but it kind of made sense. Composition, I understood it, things of this nature. And before long, we weren't hiring photographers for Chick-fil-A. I was just shooting for Chick-fil-A.
That's great.
Because I had learned enough to do that, and I didn't have to explain it to them. And again, it was a very small team, and so that kept the budgets down, and it was a win-win for everybody. But I've reflected on one reason I enjoy it. I think it taps into two things that are really core to me. So I don't know that I would say photography is core to me, but I am a communicator. Mm-hmm. And I do.
And you're a creator.
And I've got a little creativity in me. Mm-hmm. And so I always love trying to capture an image that communicates.
Tells a story. Yeah.
You may not know this, but every trip I take, every birthday party, everything, I try to leave with one image that tells the whole story.
So good. And you've made some.
And so I may go shoot for a week
Yeah.
on a trip or 2 weeks on a trip, but I'm always trying to say, how can I use this medium to communicate? And so I think that's one reason it resonates.
And we're going to share your secret here. You've taught me the secret to making a good picture. Share what that is.
It's make more pictures.
Take a lot of pictures.
That's right. The more you shoot, the better you get.
At least it's odds thing.
There
right?
there are odds.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you don't have to take very many to get that shot because you have taken some incredible pictures. It's been really cool. So okay, so I want to wrap this up with the. I want you to share something with us, and then I want to get your best piece of advice for our audience. But before I do that, so as you think about your leadership journey, these seasons of leadership, I heard you, I don't know, a year or so ago, talk a little bit about the importance of finishing well and how important that is to you. We see so many people not get to the finish line in their thing. And I think the way you described it was you wanted to have as much influence in impact and faithfulness in these last 5 years of your run at Chick-fil-A as you had in the previous 40. And you used the picture of Usain Bolt. We heard that he is incrementally getting faster at the tape and everybody else is incrementally slowing down. There's this mindset of just accelerating through the tape. For that person that's out there who is struggling to stay in the fight, they're not in year 42, they're in year 2, or they're in year 22, somewhere in that, what I call the mundane middle. Like, how do we stay in the fight? What are some things that you think we need to hear about the importance of finishing well? What would you say about that?
Well, it's speculative, obviously, because I haven't finished.
Right.
And I don't know that I will finish, which I don't know. I mean, I'll transition.
Well, I always reminded you that Bolt ends that race and he puts on the tracksuit for a few minutes and then he goes and runs the next race.
That's
so
right.
You've got another chapter in front of you.
Well, and here's the deal. And this is, I think, reflective of my worldview and my advice. I don't think you ever retire from a calling. You retire from a career.
That's right.
But you don't retire from a calling. And so for men and women who may be having trouble staying energized, and I'm not saying there haven't been moments when I wasn't energized, like Monday of this week, I was not energized.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. So don't take this too literally. But if generally speaking you're not energized, I would say go back and be sure your calling is clear. Because that's where the energy is going to come from, not from the day-to-day circumstances.
Right.
Not from the ratings you received for a talk that you gave or the sales for a new product. I mean, those things are really fleeting, and more I'm convinced we don't have as much control as we think we do on those types of things.
Yeah.
But are you doing your very best to honor your calling, your personal sense of purpose? And I think that's all we're going to ultimately be accountable for. And there, yes, may be hard seasons. If you find yourself in a hard season, I'd say a couple of quick things, because, again, we're all there from time to time. Try to discern, is it a season or is it a potential redirect? Right? Maybe you don't need to keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
And again, that's probably another talk for another day, and you're probably more qualified than I am based on some of the things that you've written. But so is it a season, and is there an end in sight, or is there no end in sight?
Is it a dead end?
Which brings another whole set of questions. I would always encourage leaders to look at your structure around you. T.D. Jakes did a talk 4 or 5 years ago, and he challenged leaders that if you're in a prolonged season of stress, pressure, and duress, his bet is your structure is not right. Because structure, by definition, is to lift and to support. And if you're...
It enables high performance, not
right,
inhibits it.
Exactly. And so if you're getting smushed and you see no end in sight, I'd say, what structurally changes can you make? And then I guess the last, this is very, very tactical, but Drucker, I got this idea from Drucker decades ago, and I think it's still true today. Most leaders have things on their calendar they can stop doing. He used to say 35%.
Wow.
I don't know if it's that high or not, but I periodically go through, and not just isolated activities that I can eliminate, but what are the things that have become institutionalized or ingrained that you don't actually need to be doing? Meetings you don't need to be attending, or reports you don't need to be creating, or whatever. And so if you're in that hard season, is it a season, or as you said, is it a dead end? Are there structural things that you can do that would lift the load? What can you stop doing? And all of that in service to your purpose and your calling.
Yeah.
And I think that might help.
That's so good. So leave us with your best leadership advice you've ever received. I think I know what you're going to say, and I also think that it will. It's important for us to stay in the fight, for us to heed what you're going to say here. So can you?
You already know my answer.
I think I do. I think I know what
you probably do.
Your best leadership advice.
My best leadership advice. Well, so if you've heard this, maybe it'll be new for your audience.
I think it will.
Several years ago, I had the opportunity to participate in a tweet chat. And I don't know that everybody knows what that is. I didn't know what that was. The way they explained it to me, they said it's like having a conversation with hundreds of thousands of people at one time.
Yeah.
It was the hardest thing I think I've ever done. So they said the way we're going to do this.
It was about one of your books.
It's about a book.
Yeah.
So they said the way we're going to do this is there's going to be a host. And the host is going to go on and they're going to post a question for me. And I'm going to answer it. And then it goes out to the tweetosphere.
To the whole world. They get to ask.
And people are responding, because I had somebody in Europe who jumped on who had 400,000 followers, and so their people jumped on. So I had all these people, and you go for 5 minutes. And if I see a response and can read it as they're going by that I want to respond to, I respond to it.
Yeah.
And then they ask me another question. And then we repeat the process. And we do another one. And we repeat the process. So we're at the end of the hour, 55 minutes in. And my brain is flat out scrambled. And the last question was, what's the best leadership advice you've ever received? Now, I was telling my mom this story, and she said, well, by the way, she's passed away, but at the time she was, 80. So she was not totally in sync with everything in the world, but she knew enough about Twitter. And she said, well, at least you had 100 words, because that's probably a complicated answer. And I said, no, Mom, I had 100 characters.
Yeah.
She said, well, that probably made it even harder. And I said, yeah, it made it really hard. And so what I chose to tell that audience that day, and what I would share with your listeners today, is the greatest leadership advice I ever received is, above all else, guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it.
Yeah. So good. So good.
And that somebody actually told me that sounded really wise. And I said, yeah, because it came from the wisest man that ever lived. That came from King Solomon.
King Solomon.
But it's still true today.
It's still true.
I think the best leadership
It's
advice
still
I ever
true.
had is, above all else, guard your heart.
Oh, man. All right, so we're back here. That's some fantastic stuff from Mark. Just listen to that conversation again myself, replaying some of the things he talked about. It's just such good reminders here. And I want to push it back on you now for a minute. As you think about your context, you may be a parent, you may not be. But if you are a parent, I want to start with us who are parents. What challenge maybe does your kid need that really, coming from you, just the ability to speak into their life, that you believe in them and you want to give them an opportunity to stretch them, to help them grow? I think it's important. Susan talked about this a couple of weeks ago, just to, when you think about communicating something with somebody, to pull back, to spend some time thinking about, what am I really wanting to communicate? Well, let's use that idea here as we think about helping develop our kids, this engaging and developing our kids. First of all, are we engaged with our kids? Are we spending time with them? Are we speaking their language? Are we fluent in their language? Or like I'll often say, are we giving them the home field advantage? In other words, we want to have them on our turf, or do we really want to get into their world and think about the things they're thinking about, the things they're interested in? As you think about engaging with your kids, it's not enough just to be engaged, but to develop them. And so pull back and ask yourself, if you have a kid, what is it that you want them to be able to learn? Where do they need to grow? What is something you would love to see them before they get out from under your roof? They may be little at this time, and you may have a lot of time left, but some of you may have just a short time. I know Susan's husband, Scott, I was in a meeting. He and I were doing a training out in California just a couple weeks ago with one of the businesses we work with, and Scott shared the story of his daughters last year, Scott and Susan's, their youngest daughter, the last year she was home 3 or 4 years ago. Scott said one of the things they did, and I thought this was a great idea, and this might be something as you begin to think about developing your kids, just this reminder for yourself of how little time you have left. Scott said he took a jar of marbles and he put 52 marbles in the jar, and each week they would have a kind of a debrief meeting. He had a second jar, and they'd move one of the marbles over, and I know you probably heard that idea before, or maybe you haven't even done something like that, but he said just every week as they thought about, less and less marbles, they were down to just a very few. And he said it just got very emotional toward the end as they realized their time was up. Well, your time with your kids is limited as well. You've only got so many months to spend with them. And I want to encourage you to be able to identify some areas where you want to see them grow. And if you've got something over the next 6 months, let's just take the rest of the year, or 5-6 months we've got left. What is that area where you want to see your kid grow? What is that area where you want to see them challenge? You want to see them step up? And how could you help train them, teach them, coach them, affirm them, encourage them, not point out their flaws? It's so easy to do that sometimes, but let's make sure that they know we're on their team, we're their advocate. But the same thing is true not just at home, but at work. If you're leading a team, some of you are coaches, and some of you are teachers, and some of you are you're business leaders. You have companies that you lead. And so every single person on your team needs to grow. Mark talked about this idea of developing people, and not everybody needs all the responsibility right up front. very few do. But everybody needs some responsibility. Everybody needs an opportunity. So who is it that you could identify this week? You could give them an opportunity, and you could stretch them, encourage them, challenge them again, celebrate them when they get it right. But if they don't, make sure you come alongside and say, hey, let's do it this way, or let's try to do it a different way. I mean, it's okay to do that, but at the end of the day, are they making steps toward development? I love that mindset, and the idea of trusting your kid to be able to get on a plane, go halfway across the world. But they remember what Mark said, they needed a guide. If you have a guide, I'll let you go. And so who's going to guide your kid? Who's going to guide your employees? They need almost a safety net mindset. I like the tightrope walker. That's great, but there needs to be a net underneath, and we're not just free climbing here when it comes to our development of our people that mean so much to us. And then the second thing that we talked about, I love this. It's the middle of summer, and Mark and I talked about his photography, a hobby that not only was it's life-giving to Mark, but it's actually a way for him to capture images in his storytelling and his creativity. As you think about your life, here you are, middle of summer, almost maybe summer's coming to an end here for some of us. You maybe have a vacation coming up, another last chance effort. What is it you're doing to put energy into yourself? Do you have some things that give you the opportunity to relax? Do you have some places that you like to go, some hobbies that you like to participate in? I think it's important to win at work. We say that all the time, but we also like to win at home. And I always say, if you win at work and you lose at home, you still lose. Well, that's not just marriage and family kind of stuff. It's actually, what are you doing to take care of you? What are you doing to put life into you? Things that are going to give you energy and give you the ability to show up at the office or on the field or wherever it is that you go and be able to add maximum value because you've been filled up yourself. You got lots to give because you're full of energy. So is there an activity that you need to give some time to this week? Maybe you haven't thought about it in a few weeks. You've been meaning to get out and play around the golf, or maybe you like to go hang out and spend time with somebody at a coffee shop. I don't know. There's somewhere you like to go. Maybe you're a photographer. Maybe you like to paint. Maybe it's music for you. You just need to go sit in the car somewhere and turn on the stereo and drown everything else out. I don't know what it is for you, but I'm guessing if you're like most leaders, you get so busy, so high speed in your life, and you don't pay a lot of attention to the things that give you life. And so I want to challenge you this week to find somebody, to give them an opportunity, engage and develop them, and then also make sure you pull back and take some time to take care of yourself. That'll help you as you continue your quest to chase greatness. It really is all about maximizing our lives, having the best life we can, because we only have one life. We've been given this gift by God. I think He wants us to steward that and to use it to the maximum, to try to add as much value as we can. It's not just about us being great. It really is about adding value. It's trying to help other people be great as well. So as we chase greatness this week, let's find somebody to develop, and then let's make sure we take care of ourselves with some of the things that are life-giving to us. If we'll do that, I think we'll be on a path to success, joy, those things that are really important to all of us. So keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference. Keep sharing, keep liking, throw those comments in. We'd love to talk to you and interact with you. And then until next week, let's all go keep chasing greatness.